Hey, and welcome to my channel, where for the past 2 years I've been sharing my latex cosplay projects and crafting tutorials. All of my videos so far have been about clothes I've made for myself, so today I'm happy to share my first latex crafting tutorial for men. In this video, I'm showing how I make a men's latex t-shirt, and when I say men's t-shirt, I mean that the fit of this garment is specifically designed to fit a standard-sized male torso with more masculine proportions. What may be slightly unique for this design is that I wanted the t-shirt to fit tightly at the chest and the arm area, but to be loose at the waist like a regular t-shirt. This was specifically requested by my customer, but with some easy modifications you can make the shirt entirely skin tight, and I'll tell you how in just a second. So first you need a t-shirt pattern. There's some good videos here on YouTube on how to either draw your patterns from your measurements or how to copy the patterns of an existing fabric t-shirt. Now, depending on the thickness of your latex and your personal preference, you want to subtract a certain percentage of your measurements. I'm guessing that the most commonly used thickness is 0.4 mm, and with that I personally like to reduce the original body measurements by 10 to 15%. If you're using thinner latex, you might want to reduce it even more or less with a thicker material. So if you want your t-shirt to fit tightly overall, you would reduce all of the horizontal measurements, but for my design I've mostly reduced the upper torso area. Here I've cut out the front and the back pieces for 3 separate shirts, since these will be the first items available in my shop. If you're interested in buying one of these shirts, watch the video till the end to hear more about the launch. Here I also cut out all the pieces for the sleeves and the v-neck, and here is just a fraction of the trim I spent an entire 8 hours cutting one day. Cutting trim is really stressful because if it's cut even a millimeter wider or thinner, it is very noticeable, and I have a lot of projects where I need it, so I always need to have some on hand. You can also buy it pre-cut, but unfortunately the black trim is not always in stock. Here I'm using solvent to clean the sleeves because I want to attach the trim on it. You should use a lot less solvent than I am in this video, but the main idea is to remove the talcum powder and any oils or proteins that are on the surface and prep the latex for the glue. Once the solvent had evaporated and the latex was laying flat against the surface again, I had applied a thin layer of latex glue, which is basically just rubber cement that has been thinned out with heptane solvent. The glue was applied on both the trim and the sleeve, and I let the excess solvent evaporate from the glue so that the pieces were laying flat again before I started sticking them together. Here I want to align the trim perfectly with the edge of the sleeve while trying my best not to stretch either of the pieces. Once I was happy with the alignment, I rolled the seams with a seam roller and wiped the edge of the seam with a bit of solvent to clean off any glue residue. You want to go in the direction of the seam so that you don't end up undoing the seam, and once you're done, you want to go over with the roller again just to make sure that the edges are pressed down. Next, I'm cleaning the neckline area with some solvent to prepare that for the v-neck collar. You can also make an O-neck if you want, which might actually be easier to cut and glue if you are a beginner, as the sharp corners of the v-neck are pretty challenging to cut. Here I had applied some glue on both pieces again and let them sit until they were both flat. For this design, I decided to attach the collar piece under the torso pieces, but structurally it doesn't make any difference which way you want to do it. And here what you want to pay attention to is to align the pieces meticulously, especially now that the torso pieces are translucent and you would be able to see if you didn't align the v-neck properly. Another thing you want to focus on is to match the ends of the collar piece to the edge of the torso piece. You can see how the other end of the front v-neck piece looks like it's longer than the piece it's attached to. That is a result of uneven placement and the other piece stretching a bit more. What usually helps with this is to keep the seam allowance even throughout the seam and flipping the work around periodically so that the other piece, usually the top piece, doesn't stretch more than the bottom piece. You just need to keep working with it until you get it right. Once the collar was attached, I cleaned the shoulder seams with solvent and applied some glue. It can be a bit difficult to see here, but I had flipped the front piece over so that I can apply the glue on the right side of the shirt, and for the back piece I applied the glue on the inside of the shirt. This can be a bit confusing if you're used to sewing, where you attach the seams by aligning the right sides of the pieces together. Here I'm then attaching the shoulder seams together. You can also do this by applying glue on one seam at the time, so you don't need to worry about the other side flopping around, but to cut time I like to do it this way. Here I'm pretty OCD about the overall alignment and the width of the seam, especially now that I'm working with translucent latex where the seams are a bit more visible than on black latex. You can see me tearing apart the seam several times and reattaching it, and this is completely fine to some extent if the glue is dry enough. If you did this with glue that still had a lot of solvent in it or just wasn't thin out enough, the glue might get stringy with every pull and add texture under the seam, so make sure your glue is not too wet or too thick. Then I attached the other shoulder, gave both the seams a good roll and cleaned off any excess glue. Next, I'm attaching the sleeves. I wiped off any markings I still have left on the pieces because I don't want any visible markings under the translucent seams. I personally prefer having the sleeve under the shoulder seam, so I'm applying the glue on the right side of the sleeve and on the wrong side of the shoulder seam. I fold the sleeve in half to find the middle line and I attach it to the very center of the shoulder seam. Since the seam is pretty curvy, I'm using a dome under it to make it a bit easier to glue it, and I normally would finish one side and then do the other side, but for some reason I didn't do that on this video. In any case, with the sleeves you might end up having the same problem that I had with the v-neck, where it looks like the other piece is too long, but most of the time the root cause is either an uneven seam or the other piece getting stretched out more, so here it can also help to flip over the work every once in a while you're gluing the seams. And if you end up with just a bit of material hanging over the seam, that might not be worth redoing the entire seam, so you can just safely trim those extra pieces off. Once both of the sleeves are attached and cleaned, I start attaching the side seams, which are the last seams to be glued together. This is one of those seams that you might mess up with if you're not focusing enough, or at least I've applied glue on the wrong side of the other piece so many times when working with side seams. Here you want to make sure that the glue goes on the right side of one piece and on the wrong side of the other piece. I put a piece of paper under the edge that is now laying on top of the shirt to keep the glue off of the rest of the shirt while applying it, and now that the glue is dry enough, I'm attaching the seam together, starting from the armpit where I aligned the shoulder seams, and then I'm moving up the sleeve, making sure that the edge and the trim aligns perfectly. Again, here you might want to flip around the work even with short seams like this if it looks like the edge will not align. This side seam took me more than 10 minutes to finish, so I'm speeding things up here a bit. Long side seams like this can be very frustrating, especially when you want it to be even throughout, and especially the seam on the other side that will be attached last is really annoying, because once the shirt starts to take shape, it gets even more challenging to keep the material under control. Rolling that last seam is also a bit more challenging, so I'm using a quilting ruler as a flat surface underneath so I can apply even pressure on the seam, and I will also flip the shirt and roll the seam from the inside so that it's flat against the table. Now you want to do a final check and see if there is still some glue residue or markings you should clean up, or if there are some edges that could be trimmed a bit, and once you're satisfied, let the shirt rest for at least 24 hours. This allows the glue to cure properly. I usually like to let my work sit for at least 3 days just to be sure, And after that, you can safely wash your shirt and apply dressing aid and polish and wear your new creation. And this is how the t-shirt looks in size medium. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, this style is designed to fit tight at the chest and the arms, but to be a bit loose at the waistline. Personally, I think this design works well for those situations where you want to wear something alternative, but keep it somewhat casual. I think it would also be a great option for someone who has never worn latex before and is not sure if they would be comfortable with clothing that is tight or restrictive. These shirts will be the first items available in my Etsy shop that will hopefully open on May 20th, so if you're interested in buying these, follow my Instagram accounts below to keep track of the launch. I've only made 6 shirts in 2 colors, and these 3 shirts are in sizes small, medium and large, so if you want one, you have to be quick. Unfortunately, I'm not able to take in individual orders yet, but if there's enough interest towards this specific design, I might make more. So if these happen to sell out before you get yours, just let me know you want one by leaving a comment here or on my shop's Instagram page. That's all for this time, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you would like to see more videos about making men's clothing, and if you are new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. I appreciate you sticking till the end, and as always, thank you for watching and happy crafting.